All right, today we're going to get into something pretty personal, kind of challenging, actually. We're going to talk about the prejudices that we might not even know we have. And we're going to do that by unpacking a really thought-provoking piece of writing.
So, our guide for this little journey is a powerful monologue by Tom Erb called The Lesson. Think of it as an unflinching look in the mirror, and right now, we're going to break down its core message together.
So the author kicks this whole thing off with a really simple, almost disarming question. Have you ever peed in a pool? Go on, think about it for a second. Honestly. That little bit of discomfort you might be feeling? Yeah, that is exactly the point.
Because here's the thing. The author claims that if you were to ask a group of people that question, a whopping 98% of them will say no. They'll lie. Now, this isn't about judging anyone. It's about this shared human instinct we have to deny something that's common, even if it's a little bit embarrassing.
It's kind of like talking to yourself in the mirror, right? Almost everybody does it, but we'd pretty much never admit it out loud. And this idea of a shared secret truth, well, that's the gateway to a much, much tougher conversation.
So, how in the world does this connect to something as serious as prejudice? This is where the monologue takes a sharp turn, moving from the pool to a far more uncomfortable truth.
And here it is, the core thesis of the entire piece. The author makes a really bold claim that in those moments of stress or fear or discomfort, when we're dealing with someone of another race, a racist thought can bubble up in any of us. He's not arguing this is about being an evil person, but that it's about our shared history and the way we've all been socially conditioned. To try and illustrate this, the author argues that prejudice isn't a one-way street. He talks about the hateful language he heard growing up, aimed at both white and black people. His argument is basically that we've all been exposed to this poison. He suggests that this ugly language is just woven into the fabric of our society by history, and to pretend that one of these words has never crossed our mind is the exact same kind of denial as lying about peeing in the pool. But the author argues that this conditioning, it goes so much deeper than just words. It shows up in ways that are way more subtle and maybe, just maybe, a lot more common. He says these internal biases often show up in these small, almost unconscious actions. Clutching a purse a little tighter, crossing the street for no real reason, a forced smile, or making an instant assumption about someone. These quiet, reflexive moments, that's where prejudice often lives, far away from any overt acts of hate. They're the kind of things many of us might recognize in ourselves, but then we try to forget about them as quickly as possible. And this is why these small moments are so important. According to the author, a silent thought or a subtle action isn't harmless. He calls them carriers of hate. And when those moments are repeated by millions of people, they end up reinforcing the very systems of oppression that created them in the first place. It's all about how our individual actions can perpetuate a much, much larger cycle. This brings us to a really key idea in the monologue. The author argues that this isn't about pointing fingers at one single group. Instead, he defines it as a human problem. A problem, he says, that stays alive and well because of the comforting lie we tell ourselves, that it's always someone else's issue. Okay, so if the problem really is this deep and this widespread, what's the solution? Well, the monologue doesn't just diagnose the problem, it actually offers a path forward. The text lays out a pretty clear 4-step framework. First, you gotta face it. That means ending that denial we talked about right at the start. Second, challenge it. You have to actively question those unwanted thoughts when they pop up. Third, speak up. Confront racism when you see it or hear it around you. And finally, number 4, do better. Just commit to the process, listening, learning, and always trying to improve. And the author is really clear about this. This work is not comfortable. It requires looking at parts of ourselves we probably rather ignore. But, and this is important, the core message is actually one of hope. Just acknowledging the problem is the biggest, most critical step towards solving it. Change is possible. And that brings us right to the final, powerful takeaway from this whole piece. It all comes back to us. The responsibility is on each and every one of us.
So the monologue leaves us with one last question. The next time an unconscious bias or a conditioned thought pops into your head, what are you going to do? Are you going to fall back on denial, like the 98% at the pool? Or are you going to choose to do the hard, necessary work of being better? The choice, the author argues, is yours.